get a call from in the office with somebody, a homeowner, asking us what our normal procedure would be, and I like to go look at the house before I do anything. Because it happens sometimes that if there's asbestos in the house or vermiculite, I might not be able to do the testing.
Okay.
And it also happens occasionally that I'm not able to really save them much or improve the house by very much. I'd like to let them know that. Makes no sense to do an audit if you're not going to realize some savings from it. And but the first step really is to look at the house, see what I'm faced with, and then talk to them about my procedure, which is to do a test on the house, which is data collection, do a blower door test to determine how much airflow there is through the house, data collection on the heating system, the appliances, checking out insulation levels in the house, looking also for anything that could be a health hazard in the house. And then I take that information back, I put that information in Efficiency Vermont's computer.
Okay.
And I create a list for them of the projects that I would do on their house in the order that I would do them, with a price attached to each of those projects, and talk to them about how that would affect things in their house. And then the Efficiency Vermont computer printout would tell them, if you do step 1, you'll save this, step 2, you'll save that. And I go down that list with the homeowner. They make a decision how much they'd like to do. Go down the list, draw the line where they would, where their budget allows them to do the work. We then schedule the work, and once the work is completed, we put that new data in the computer at Efficiency Vermont, and then we come back and we make sure that we've got all the information on airflow and so forth through the house. And Efficiency Vermont will send them their incentive money directly.
And one clarifying question, maybe Jeff, you could answer this for me, is someone told me that you have to be a BPI certified contractor in order to be able to get Efficiency Vermont's incentives. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And are there only ones in Southern Vermont? Do you have in Northern Vermont and Central Vermont?
Yeah, BPI stands for Building Performance Institute, and they are an organization, a national organization, that has a set of standards for treating the home, as Jim was saying, treating the home and looking at it in a whole building science point of view. So as Jim was saying, first and foremost, it is about both energy efficiency and health and safety. And it's also about building comfort and building durability as well. And all of these are incorporated together. BPI has a set of standards that allow all of these things to take place, and it allows the contractors to do these in a very professional and effective way. And it is important that if someone wants to have their house treated and wants to do it in a way that is going to consider all of these scenarios, all of these components of the house. And again, it's more than just energy efficiency, it's health and safety, comfort, building durability, that you want to have a BPI certified contractor doing that work. They also are going to have a blower door fan.
Yeah, I heard something about this.
Correct.
Can you talk about blower door and
Sure.
I was told CFM, I think?
Yep. So what they'll do is they will put a large fan in the door, one of the exterior doors, and they are going to turn the fan on, and they are going to depressurize the house up to a certain threshold. That threshold is supposed to be up to a certain amount, 50 pascals of air pressure. And then once they get up to whatever threshold they can get up to, in some cases they cannot get up that high because the house is too leaky, as happens somewhat often. And so they'll get the house up to as high as a negative pressure as they can, and then they'll check to see what the flow was that was required for that. That flow is measured in cubic feet per minute, CFM.
So one of the most important things we do is test the tightness of the building, and we do that through the use of a blower door. And the way I try to explain it to people is if you had a balloon you were trying to blow up, and that balloon had a bunch of pinholes in it, you'd have to work really hard to get that thing to inflate. If it only had a couple of pinholes, you wouldn't have to work nearly as hard. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to treat the building like the balloon, and we're going to see how hard the fan has to work to get it to blow up. In this case, we're actually going to depressurize. We're actually going to push air out of the house, out of the building. But it's the same math, whether it's positive pressure or negative pressure. So we have a number of different pressure ports. We have a manometer that can measure things, and a very powerful fan. And we're going to push air out of the building until we get to minus 50 pascals of pressure. Sounds like a lot. It's not a tremendous amount of pressure. And then we see how hard the fan has to work to get us there. And the number that we come up with is a very common number in building science, and that's your CFM50 number. How many cubic feet per minute does the fan have to move to get the building to 50 pascals of pressure? Really big number. House is really leaky. Really small number. The house is pretty tight. You can see there's a number of different rings on the fan. Newer high-performance homes are so tight that I can't make the fan spin slow enough, and so I just have to change the aperture down until it's a very, very small ring.
Okay, and that helps identify some of the opportunities that maybe Jim can take advantage of in the
Jim is
home.
talking about, the opportunities of air sealing a house.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And can Efficiency Vermont help identify where you might find a BPI certified contractor in the state of Vermont?
Yes.
Okay.
A homeowner who's interested in doing this work is strongly encouraged to call Efficiency Vermont's customer service.
Okay.
And call that number, or to look on our website.
Okay.
And they can quickly find that once they're on the website, they will go to home, for my home, and then they'll go to rebates or services.
Okay.
And within a matter of a few clicks, they can get to a list of local BPI contractors for that homeowner's area.
Okay.
Yeah, and each contractor has a list of all of the services they provide.
Okay.
That are kind of act as subcategories within them being a BPI home performance contractor.
Okay.
Which in some cases may include written reports, although I think all of them do written reports now, infrared thermal imaging, so that when a blower door is being conducted, you can, the contractor can go around and actually, in combination with that blower door, in combination with the house being depressurized, they can use the infrared camera to find where all the leaks are.
Okay.
Or to find the leaks and to find the weaknesses in insulation.
Okay.
So any place that looks a little cooler, a little darker, is going to be a place where cold air is coming in,
Okay. And
or where there's going to be a void in insulation.
okay.
So what we have here is a situation where we've completed one of the energy retrofits that we've done. And fortunately, in this case, we were able to cut back 16 inches of the sheetrock on the ceiling here and the exterior walls. So we could get at this area up in here that's normally considered to be the sill area, or some people call it the box sill, or the rim joist area, to the second floor joist. In this particular case, we had balloon framing. So we have studs that go all the way through, and there's no air block at all and no fire block there. So we opened that up, we were able to get at that area and get it all insulated, fire blocked, air sealed. And then we replaced the 16 inches of sheetrock all the way around the exterior walls in the older part of the house here. What that does is that stops the air from flowing up through the wall system and getting up into the floor joist system, or continuing up even farther than that. And then the volunteers here got it all taped in. We did a lot of caulking and sealing around windows. Wherever there's a wood-to-wood joint, wherever there's a wood to sheetrock joint, all of that got sealed up. We also went through the whole house and put gaskets on all the outlets. When we came back and put the blower door on at the end of the project, we discovered some air leaks that we hadn't known anything about. For instance, underneath the baseboard radiation, we sealed that all up with foam. And I think in the end result of this particular project, we were able to reduce the airflow through the house by 58%, which is a very good result, particularly given that it was mostly, in this case, done by volunteers. I was very impressed by that.
And Jim, just a couple clarifying questions. So if I were to get an audit and you laid this audit out with all of the opportunities in my home, one, do I necessarily have to do those in order? And the second question is, if I have one BPI certified contractor perform the audit, does that person necessarily have to do the work?
Interesting. Sometimes the homeowner likes to do some of the things themselves.
Yeah.
When I make my list, I always make my list in an order that I would do the work if it were my own house.
Okay.
There are a few items. Let's take insulating your attic, for instance. That will always be preceded by an item called air sealing of the attic.
Okay.
And that means we would go into the existing attic and we would try to find any place where air can escape into the attic from the house and seal that up prior to adding any insulation to the attic. Because you can well imagine, if we have 1.5 feet of cellulose up in that attic, before we air seal it, we've got a problem. It has happened where homeowners will call me up and say, I've put the insulation in my attic, now can you come air seal it? And I'm sorry, but it's too late.
Yeah.
So basically, I usually have the things done in an order that makes the most sense to me.
Okay.
We do juggle them around sometimes depending on money, depending on what the homeowners would like to do for themselves. And I usually try to coach them through some of it. But some of the things are technical enough so that really our crews need to do them.
Okay. And we're talking about a home here, but did this similar type of conversation happen, do you happen to know, in a commercial building as well?
That would be a little beyond my pay grade.
Yeah.
I have done a couple of small commercial buildings, but
Yeah.
they were basically houses that were converted over to commercial use. And I think maybe Jeff could talk a little more about the commercial side of that.
Sure.
Yeah, there is a branch of, so to speak, of home performance called building performance.
Okay.
And that is intended to serve, usually smaller commercial buildings. One of the more common buildings served with building performance would be the typical municipal building, a town office or a library, for example.
Jim, would you mind talking a little bit about some of the savings opportunities that you do see when you're doing these audits, and then afterwards when you've actually completed some of the work?
Sure. Probably one of the major things that we see is how effective air sealing can be. And there's a joke around the industry where we say high, low, and middle, which means high is pretty easy to get at most attics. Low, basements are usually easy to get at. And then in the middle, although the easiest one in the middle, of course, to get at is outlet gaskets.
Okay.
So we put a gasket on the outlet, we put a child safety cap in with a punch out from the gasket behind that, and it does a good job of sealing up all of those. And we do the interior walls as well when it comes to those gaskets. But most basements are open. We can get at them. The sill area in the basement is usually the easiest for us to get at. Really quick payback on that.
Okay.
And then in the attic, it's usually fairly simple to go up there and air seal, and then add usually blown cellulose in most open attics, although there are a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different materials that can be used.
Okay.
And so here we have a fairly typical situation in older houses here in Bennington, and that is we have a stone foundation, pretty leaky, air comes through it everywhere. Even though this particular foundation was in good condition, air makes its way through, and also you can imagine foundation is not a good insulator at all. It's about an R1, about the same as a pane of glass. And what we've done here is we have foamed 3 inches of foam on the surface of the stone, covered it with fire paint, intumescent paint, and also probably the most important area that we've dealt with is this area right up in here against the sills, between the floor joists, right out over the top of the wall. We've made sure we got all of that sealed up as well as we possibly could. Again, spray foam up in that area. Sealed it up. Spray foam is a moisture barrier, it's a wind barrier, and it's also an insulator. So it's a good product to use in this particular case. We've got another situation over here. What we have in this area is the transition from an old stone foundation to a newer modern poured foundation. And the difference for insulation is that here you have a rough surface, it'd be very difficult to insulate with sheet products. But so over here we used sheet foam, and we applied that right directly to the concrete, and then we put strapping on top of that and insulated in between the strapping. So you can see here where we put sheetrock up to fire protect it, as opposed to here where we used intumescent paint to fire protect the foam. So we have foam in there, we have sheet foam, and we also went up in here between the floor joists and installed sheet foam against the outside rather than the spray foam. Although you have to make sure that there's plenty of sealing around the edges. Any cracks that you find, everything has to be sealed with gun foam. So this particular area, this addition area, was done that way. And I think it's something that the average homeowner could probably do with a little bit of help.
I think, Jim mentioned something about, there was occasionally, you will run into, the presence of vermiculite in an attic, and that has to be treated as asbestos.
Okay.
It has to be treated as if it is definitely contaminated with asbestos. And if that's the case, then there can be no work done in the attic until it is, professionally removed.
Okay.
And if one is to do any type of diagnostic testing in a house where vermiculite has been identified, then there has to be, instead of depressurizing the house, you have to pressurize it. You have to turn the fan around, and you have to, make sure that the fan is blowing in, and that's serving to pressurize. And that's because if you don't want to pull any potential, contaminated material from the vermiculite into the house, into the living quarters.
Okay.
So pressurizing the house ensures that would probably not happen.
Okay.
So what we have here is an example of what needs to happen in any particular house of this age. This is a turn of the century type house. What we have here is a joist area that on the other side of this, you could say that there's virtually no insulation here. It was a thin layer of wood. What we try to do in this, while we have the ceiling torn down, we try to get at this and get all of this air sealed, usually using either block foam or spray foam. And while we're at it, if this is open, we also try to get any area where the air can move from one floor to the other. This could be in a basement, or this could be, in this case, it's onto the second floor. And what we have here is a big cutout that the plumber needed. We would fit blocks of foam in here, and we would foam in around it with to seal it up so that no air can get from this area up. And the other opportunity that we have here is to seal the cracks in the floorboards so that, again, air doesn't make it from this layer up. Most houses this is difficult to get at, but when we have the opportunity to tear this open and get at this area, this is what we'd really like to do. There's almost no opportunity to get at this once we've sheetrocked, got it finished on the inside.
Yeah.
And one other thing that I just thought of is windows. Everyone's always telling me, replace my windows, replace my windows. Does Efficiency Vermont offer a rebate for that, or what are traditionally your recommendations around windows?
That's interesting. When I got my training, one of the gentlemen who was in the class with me was from a window company. And he was a little discouraged to find out that windows ended up at the very bottom of the list because they're so expensive to replace. And when we tested a house from the 1960s, we tested an outlet, and there was a right below a window. And it turned out, it was a normal sized window, and it turned out we made a pan for the window, and we found out there was more air coming through the outlet than the window.
Wow.
So the short answer on that is that windows will be pretty far down the list.
Okay.
And if your windows are in miserable condition, well, you may want to replace them anyway.
Yeah.
But to think that that's going to be a huge factor in a thermal dynamics of your house, it probably isn't.
Okay.
Although if you'd like to sit next to your window and read your book, well, you're probably going to change the window.
So if I understand you guys correctly, probably air sealing and insulation are two of the biggest opportunities in many folks' homes.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a case that it's less invasive than a lot of people think.
Okay.
Because if I'm in your attic, you might not know I'm there
Mm-hmm.
until maybe I make too much noise like a big rat.
Right.
But then the same thing down in the basement. If I'm in the basement working, typically as long as I can move people's things out of the way, you won't know I'm there.
Okay.
Reducing the air infiltration of a house is typically the best bang for the buck that someone can have.
Okay.
It is. And another good thing about that is that often if an insulation improvement has been identified in the house, it often also contributes to the air infiltration reduction.
Okay.
For example, there could be an old fieldstone or rubble foundation in a much older house, and insulating that with a spray foam material, for example.
Okay.
A closed cell spray foam material also will get you some fairly significant air infiltration reduction numbers as well.
Okay.
So you get two of those really beneficial elements from doing one measure.
Okay.
And the same thing with doing, you can do the same thing in an attic. You might, put a couple inches of spray foam in an attic before you finish putting, cellulose, for example, in the attic to finish up the insulation value, the required amount.
Okay.
And that's another example of that.
So what we have here is a typical situation with a rubble stone foundation and an uninsulated sill area in the basement. The area between the floor joists here against the sill, we normally would add spray foam, closed cell foam insulation to that area and bring that insulation down here in a thickness of about 3 inches to cover all of this. Because as you can tell, all of these small gaps in here will leak air all the way down through the wall, and the air will find its way down through there in the wintertime. So the more sealing you can do on this, if you can afford it, to do it right to the floor, it does an excellent job of insulating, reducing airflow, and also reducing the moisture if you use closed cell foam. And then we're also looking at any of these places where pipes go up through the walls. These are wide open spaces where air can flow up into the house, and we definitely need to get that sealed. Here we have an example. It probably doesn't show up on the camera very well, but there's a pipe here that carries electrical wires up into the attic. And that pipe is open at the bottom, open at the top. And while it might not seem like a very large area, if you have those all over the house, pretty soon you're dealing with a much larger area going all the way from the basement to the attic. It's acting exactly like a chimney, pulling all of your expensive heated air right up into the attic where you definitely don't want it.
And then can roughly how much money is available from Efficiency Vermont in these incentives through this Home Performance with Energy Star program?
There's a maximum of $2,500.
Okay.
And sometimes that changes. Sometimes it's, not quite that much. Sometimes it's a little bit more.
Yep.
Sometimes there are special promotions or initiatives going on. But typically right now it's running at generally $2,500 throughout most of the year.
Okay.
And there is an extra incentive available right now for larger houses that have maxed out of the current incentive amount. So if it's a
Okay.
larger house that has larger square footages,
Yep.
they can take advantage of even more money
Okay.
by doing the air sealing and insulation work. And those incentives are available for both air sealing, which is reducing the air infiltration, insulation, and also there are some available. There's $500 available for heating system upgrades.
Okay.
That have to be they have to meet a certain requirement
Okay.
of a heating system upgrade for either a furnace or a boiler. And any health and safety issue that is identified during an audit has to be addressed and resolved before
Understood.
before any of the before that job is submitted and any incentives are guaranteed to the homeowner.
Okay. Okay.
So what we have here is a typical situation in most older homes. You have an entrance to the basement from the outside with a metal hatchway. And what we do in these situations is we would install an insulated door, weather strip it heavily, and make sure it's sealed in all the way around the stonework with expanding foam. And so what you can see here is this door fits really tight. It really is tight all the way around, weather stripped all the way around. This is a thick door, has insulation panel on the inside, protected by plywood on both sides. And it seals off an area that is typically very, very leaky with air. You'll see this open over and over and over in older houses. So here's a situation where this probably saved them quite a few $100s in oil. Shuts tightly, positive lock, and here you've dealt with one of the major problems. It's a one-day project for our crew to do it. It makes a huge difference. And here's a good example of where you can see the foam has sealed around all the stones, and versus an area that still needs to be sealed. And a lot of this is loose. And where you see spider webs, you have air movement, I can guarantee that.
Jim, just one last question I forgot. Is there a cost associated with the audit, and how much is this? And is it different amongst contractors?
I think it is different amongst contractors. I've never been able to find out exactly what other people charge. We had charged $450 for the audit, and that includes the original data collection, creating the list of the work to be done,
Okay.
including the test out and the final paperwork to get the incentive money.
Okay.
Now, Efficiency Vermont started to give me $100 towards that, and so I reduced the price of that to $350.
Okay.
I don't know what other contractors charge, but I think we're about in the realm. I think.
Okay.
So here's an area where almost every house gives you a great opportunity. It's not the favorite for the building BPI person to go in here, but we inspect all of these areas and we make a recommendation to the homeowner as to how this can be improved. Typically in older houses, this section of the house was not built of the same quality as the rest of the house. The foundation typically would admit more air. It's harder to get at, and very often what would happen is a homeowner would send somebody up in there to put fiberglass on the underside of the floor. And in this particular case, you can see this fiberglass is upside down. It's got the vapor barrier instead of towards the warm side of the house, it's to the cold, what would be the cold side. Crawl spaces typically will have a lot more frozen pipes than you'll have anywhere else in the house. It's unfortunate, they're the hardest to get at. In this particular crawl space, we had broken pipes that we had to get at to repair for the homeowner. It's a terrible job. But once this is insulated at the perimeter, then a lot of these problems go away. Fortunately, our spray foam guy is a small guy. He can get into these spaces. We can make a huge difference here, although it's one of our least favorite places to have to work, as you can well imagine.
Wonderful. So my next steps are, unless I'm leaving anything out, call Efficiency Vermont, get a BPI certified contractor, and get myself an audit to identify some opportunities in my home.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And I just want to, I'm sorry, I just want to add one more thing I'd like to tell everybody. I've been saying this for years. If any folks out there are on the fence about doing this kind of work, there are different types of renovations one can do for their home. But doing the work that Jim Goodine does and other contractors do, not only are you going to be improving the quality of your house, but you're going to be making a home improvement that is saving you money.
Absolutely.
So that's very important, and the money that you save after, in some cases it's a tremendous amount of money, and that money now you can put towards the other home improvement you wanted to do. Maybe it was a new kitchen, or maybe it was a new bathroom. So that's just something to always keep in mind, if somebody's on the fence about what to do.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.